Hello, everybody. We are about to start. Probably we can wait a minute or two. More participants are gathering. So we can start at 2:03 if everybody is okay with that. Okay, perfect. We are going to start. So good afternoon and welcome to the Planning After NPF4 Networks and Nature-Based Solutions webinar. My name is Dana Arellana. I'm the Resident Policy Manager of the Scottish Wildlife Trust. If anyone doesn't know who we are a Scotland-based charity working on wildlife and natural habitat conservation. First, I want to thank you very much to be here today. We really appreciate you giving your time and to learn more about nature networks and natural-based solutions and the opportunities that they can offer for implementation. On today's webinar, we have a very excited lineup of panelists, but first we want to start with a poll question that I'm going to launch just now. And so we have the following question is, how many of you are working on planning or representing local planning authorities? We have a few points here. Working on planning from the NGO sector, representing local planning authorities / the council, working on planning as a consultant, or I'm not working on planning. So let's give a wee minute and we can continue. We can have one more minute for anyone that wants to answer the poll. We have 91% participation on this one. Okay, probably we can stop now to end the poll. Okay, all results are 25% are related to planning, local authorities or council, 31% is other, and there's also over 20% of people, they are not related to planning at the moment. Okay, great. We can start webinar just now. So I'm going to share with you the agenda for today's session. The agenda, we are going to start with an introduction to the NPF4, talk about opportunities for nature-based solutions approaches. After, there is going to be a presentation about nature networks, and we are going to wrap up with a presentation from Edinburgh Council related to that. At the end, we have a Q&A, so we want to encourage you to leave your questions in the box at the bottom, and we are going to address that at the end. So without further introduction, we are going to start with talking shortly about the NPF4 just released. So as I mentioned, I'm a terrestrial policy manager for the Scottish Wildlife Trust, and I would like to introduce you to the NPF4 and this link from the policy perspective with nature networks development. The NPF4, or National Planning Framework 4, is a long-term planning looking to 2045 that guides spatial development, set out national planning policies, designate national developments, and highlight regional spatial priorities. The document was released a couple of months ago, the 13th of February, and replaced the previous Scottish planning policy, but not all. You may notice that some policy has not been replaced or updated yet. The strategy is split in two. Part one is related to national spatial strategy for Scotland 2045, and part two to national planning policy. The framework includes 6 spatial principles from just transition to rural revitalization. The 3 main policy aspects in the NPF4 are related to sustainable places, livable places, and productive places. And in this presentation, we want to see which is the next links between NPF4 and sustainable places and livable places. So the NPF4 defines nature networks as a joined up system of places important for wild plants and animals on land and in water. It allows plants, animals, seeds, nutrients, water to move from place to place and enable the natural world to adapt to change, providing plants and animals with places to live, feed, and breathe. So in this slide, we can see that sustainable places consider nature networks from biodiversity to green belts. What does it mean? For example, for biodiversity, the policy intent is to build natural networks, conserve biodiversity, stop biodiversity loss, and bring beneficial development impacts. That means the policy tree is essential. Policy tree, the planning system is rebalanced on the policy tree in favor to preserving, restoring, and promoting biodiversity and encourage investment in natural-based solutions. On natural places, what we have is the policy intent is adopting natural-based solutions to preserve, improve, and protect natural resources. The policy 4 promotes and safeguards the natural heritage of forestry, woodland, and trees. We are talking about the policy intent is to safeguard and grow trees, forests, and woodland, and policy 6's aims are to save and enlarge woodland, forests, and trees. And the green belts, the policy intent is to facilitate, encourage, and assist compact urban expansion and sustainable. And the policy 8 oversees green belt development. So also we have a nature networks related to livable places. In this case, the policy intent is to safeguard and improve the networks that support blue and green infrastructure, and the policy 20 encourage green and blue infrastructure and nature networks. So now we have a framework that encourage nature networks on planning. Also, I would like to share with you that on the Scottish Wildlife Trust, we have been working for planning for a long time. We have some resources on our website. At the bottom, you can see a link and under how you can get involved, which will help when making a personal response, we have some kits of documents about biodiversity, policy, and planning. For example, related to how to respond on application, some resources so you can contact a volunteer planning group in your area if it's something that you are interested in. So please to take a look at that. So thank you for listening. And now I'm going to stop share my screen. And we are going to hand it over to Rebecca just now. Rebecca is our natural-based solutions policy advisor for the Scottish Wildlife Trust. Rebecca has been working on over 2 years with the Trust on the opportunities that natural-based solutions can offer and the diverse scales to benefit people and nature. Rebecca has been involved in policy work and community engagement, and she will give us an insight into integrated natural-based solutions for nature networks under the NPF4. So Rebecca, we will hand over to you.
Thanks, Danae. I'll just share my screen. You see that okay? Great. Okay. Yes, thank you very much for everyone for joining. As Danae said, I am the Nature-Based Solutions Policy Advisor at the Trust. Just one moment, sorry. And yeah, I'm going to talk to you about what exactly nature-based solutions are. So at the Trust, we're advocating for the IUCN definition, and that has been included in NPF4. I like to think in part from our efforts, but I'll go over that, what exactly a nature-based solution is. I'll just read it out because it's helped to cement it a bit more in your head. So nature-based solutions are actions to protect, sustainably manage and restore natural and modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. And it's really those kind of multiple benefits that we want to focus on when it comes to nature-based solutions, and make sure that we're using nature to the best for the best tool that it possibly can be. Now, these things are often mentioned within local development plans, but they're currently kind of underused and underfunded and underappreciated in urban planning. So, and there are so many examples at multiple scales that we really should be taking advantage of nature in our urban environments. Just to explain it a little bit more about how a nature-based solution would work. So we have this societal challenge that, for example, that might be persistent flooding within an area. We can then have the nature-based action. So perhaps that is further upstream. We want to regenerate a wetland, and that can help. That changes the ecosystem structure and the function there, increasing the amount of water that can be held within the space, changing the permeability of the habitat. And that has a change in the ecosystem service. So the ecosystem service is where we can avoid a flooding and reduce the erosion along the catchment. And in the long term, or at the end kind of point of that, is that change in societal benefits. So people's houses, people's homes, people's businesses are no longer damaged and destroyed by the flooding. So within the Trust, we have come up with some policy where we think that nature-based solutions really need to focus on to have the best benefit. And we've come up with these 5 different points. So to start, they need to be additional, and that's nature-based solutions need to be on top of decarbonising and the climate action from each sector. So we can't just use nature-based solutions as a way to kind of mask the bad things that we're doing in each sector and go on as business as usual. They also need to be just, so that's where nature-based solutions should address societal inequalities and wherever possible, and improve the access to nature for all, so ensuring that just transition. We also need them to be reconnecting, so that's whether that's connecting nature to itself, connecting individual projects and habitats so that it's more resilient to a changing climate, and we have that genetic diversity. But we also want to connect people to nature as well. We want to reconnect people especially within the urban environment, back to nature. And then there needs to be an aspect of knowledge sharing. So to ensure that lessons learned, the skills and expertise that have been used in previous projects are utilised, and that we don't make the same mistakes again, and that resources are best allocated. And then finally, they also need to be place appropriate. So nature-based solutions will need to be suitable for the conditions and the priorities of the area where they're implemented. So that will come through involving the community in all aspects of the nature-based solution project. I'm just going to go into ecosystem services quickly. So this image shows the different benefits that nature can provide us in the kind of 4 different categories, and is often the services that we kind of monetize and exploit, that they're the provisioning ones that we kind of recognize most, and that's things like raw materials, water and food, and the genetic resources that can be used in medicines. Then there's regulating services, which include ecosystem services that clean and maintain our environment, such as purifying water and cleansing the air, or preventing erosion and storing carbon. And there's the cultural ecosystem services, and I think these are one of although these are very important in the urban environment, because we are so densely packed in that space that we need to have those benefits, those kind of well-being benefits, those the kind of feeling of connecting to nature, the providing space for us to enjoy, and then also the supporting ones. So they're kind of the underlying ecosystem services that will really support the other ones that I've just mentioned. So that's things like biodiversity and photosynthesis and soil structure as well. So as I was mentioning, the kind of cultural aspects of the cultural nature-based solutions, are not nature-based solutions, ecosystem services are very important within the urban environment, because there's so many people that can benefit from that. So, and it's often space where there's just limited space for nature as well. And the lack of ecosystem services to fulfill our cultural needs, because there's a melting pot of lots of different cultures and have diverse demands on nature as well. And cultural ecosystem services are often more obvious to people living within the urban environment. You can see the trees, the flowers, you can hear the birds, but people often don't recognize that a lot of our fresh air and our water comes from nature as well, but it's not completely obvious a lot of the time. And there's long-term multiple benefits, whether it's direct benefits or money saved through perhaps reducing impact on the NHS or water treatment, are very important for us to consider within the urban environment. And nature-based solutions can help bring these multiple benefits. So this is an example, just comparing a conventional drainage system to we've probably come across green or SUDS a lot, so sustainable urban drainage systems. And this just demonstrates that while we'll get that land and property value and that water quality or quantity kind of regulation with conventional drainage systems, if we were to put in a kind of nature-based solution version of a drainage system, we'd have those community benefits. There would be a space for people. We'd have the carbon storage and sequestration. We'd improve air quality. There'd be amenity value and biodiversity value. There'd be that health and well-being benefits as well. And it would impact the temperature, so reduce the urban heat island effect as well. So there's so many benefits that we need to consider, that we need to, well, recognize from nature. So this is just a case study that I found where researchers in Barcelona, or researchers had looked at Barcelona as an example, looking at the different kind of scales of nature-based solutions. So whether that's at the city scale, municipal scale, or the regional scale, as often there's a bit of a problem around nature-based solutions being pilot projects or done in isolation. So ideally, nature-based solutions will be used within the nature network of a city of regional scale. And we need to look at that through a mapping so that green and blue spaces can be assessed for the best possible return on investment, and so they can provide the best benefits for the community and for the wider society. And this is something that we'll get onto later when we look at Edinburgh's Nature Network. So I'm just going to go into some brief examples of what possible nature-based solutions. So this is quite a striking one in Milan, where they've planted up the balconies of these quite tall apartment blocks, and that there's over 800 trees in this space. So that's given about the vegetation equivalent of 1 hectare of woodland. And the dense planting has improved the air quality and keeps the building cool and has provided green jobs. I think they refer to themselves as vertical gardeners. But while this is very striking, I think there's a bit of an issue around it's very exclusive. So the apartments in these blocks will cost northward of 2 million euros. So they're not for everyone, but projects like this can help us. We can gather lessons learned from these innovative projects, and we'll hopefully take those lessons learned to more modest and affordable ways as well. Another example is the Green Corridor project in Medellin in Colombia. So they've transformed verges of 18 roads and 12 waterways with planting and regeneration. And this has made considerable impacts on the urban temperature, reducing it by 2 degrees Celsius and making it noticeably different for those living in the city. The top left image was also, they've taken some derelict sites within the city and made them into small community gardens. And they've trained up people who were previously unemployed to be gardeners across the city. So it provides the green jobs, sustainable green jobs there as well. And they have estimated that the cost benefit of this project amounts to around $136 million. So that's US dollars between 2020 and 2030. So that's looking into the future with this project. Another example a bit closer to home, so Glasgow Canal and North Gateway. This was the City Council and Scottish Canals worked together to regenerate an area in urban Glasgow along the canal, and combined with the smart technology which monitors rainfall and adjusts the canal accordingly, they have made this green space which will be flooded temporarily when there's high rainfall. But when it's not flooded, it's a space which people can use and has been planted to prioritize biodiversity and help with other impacts of climate change as well. And it's estimated that over the long-term life of the project that it'll save around £450 million when compared to grey infrastructure that would achieve similar benefits for when it's flooding. Just a smaller project closer to home, something that we've been or even closer to home, something that we've been working on, we worked on with Scottish Water. So this is at Cumbernauld, where previously there was the water pollution and flooding coming from the Red Burn. So to help mitigate this, Scottish Water got in touch with us because they wanted to implement a sustainable urban drainage pond. And then we helped with the planting, the biodiversity aspect of it. And this has helped reduce the runoff, which has resulted in clean water and reduced flooding and increased biodiversity. And they've also got that human benefit because we're no longer flooding, but it's also provided a nice space for people to visit, because these suds are they are open for people to walk around. I don't think you can get in them. I think that would be a bit dangerous, but it is a space that people can enjoy. And obviously there's wildlife using the space there as well. So Cumbernauld, just to look a bit closely at the project there as a whole. So we have Cumbernauld Living Landscapes, which is a partnership working with the local community, where we've got a long-term vision for a green network across the town, which would provide clean air and water and a place for people to relax and exercise and enjoy nature. And it's really that kind of close community working that has ensured that what we've implemented there, what we've done with the local community, is best suited for their needs. And it's also we've implemented projects, we call it Wild Ways Well, where we take out people who are perhaps from a more diverse background, so they can enjoy the space and feel like it's for them, and help reduce the kind of impact of their mental health, and it improves or reduces the burden on local health services as well. So it's these changes to the way we manage green space also have benefits for carbon capture and biodiversity as well. And it's really this kind of looking at the inequalities in access to nature that nature-based solutions within a nature network can really help with, because there's quite a distinct inequality in access across the UK. So a study by Groundworks, which is a charity looking at the environment and poverty, has stated that 40% of people from ethnic minority backgrounds live in spaces which are deprived of direct ecosystem services, so they're not getting any benefits from nature. And then 29% of people living with long-term illness or disability have not visited natural spaces within the previous month. And this can have significant knock-on effects for people's health and well-being. So green spaces in deprived areas are often also reported as being of low quality, presenting more safety concerns and they have a lack of rest areas. But if we improve that space, there has been evidence to show that people living in perhaps a deprived area, but have access to a good quality green space, have a much better physical and mental health than people living in a similar socioeconomic background or socioeconomic situation, but do not have that access to green space. And this is true of Scotland as well. And it's something that was covered, was looked at when it came to Edinburgh's Nature Network. So I've zoomed through that quite quickly. Sorry if have been unintelligible, but just to conclude, nature-based solutions are essential for kind of sustainable urban living to make it a nice place to be, but in part because they provide multiple benefits. But we need to ensure that the community is involved in all aspects of the project, and that we really focus on the needs of them, what they want to get out of the space. There will be many options for different outcomes and different scales, and they'll really help to reduce the inequality if we ensure that the community is involved. And they'll also play a key role in nature networks, hopefully acting as those connectors for high quality nature areas in the urban environment and beyond. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing there.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rebecca. That was really informative. Now we are going to continue our agenda with SK. Dr. Sarah K. Reid is an Edinburgh Nature Network manager, a program from the Scottish Wildlife Trust in partnership with Edinburgh Council. She will give us a deep insight in the Edinburgh Nature Network's GIS tool to illustrate the interventions and actions to enhance nature in urban context. So Sarah Kate, I hand over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I will just start off by hopefully sharing my screen. We've had a couple technical difficulties, so it might not come through. Is everyone able to see? I'm not able to see you, Janai, so I'm not quite sure.
No yet, but otherwise I can share my screen.
Okay, maybe we'll go ahead and just share your screen. Unless it's just started working. Oh, great.
Perfect.
Okay, lucky me. All right, so as Janai kindly mentioned, I'm Sarah Kate Reid. So I work at the Scottish Wildlife Trust as the Edinburgh Nature Network manager. So today I'm just going to chat a bit about the development process. So I came onto this project in late 2022, but this project's been active since 2020. So I can give a bit of background on the historical work that went into the development of the Nature Network, but I can attribute a lot of that work to an individual called Danya Davidson and the staff who was at Thriving Green Spaces at the time, who did a lot of this, but I will provide a summary as best I can. So for my presentation today, I'm going to go over the historical work. So that will go into the development of the Edinburgh Nature Network. So that includes a list of the tasks required that we used to create the Edinburgh Nature Network, the partners involved that we had in the ENN, as well as information on the actions, action codes, and information that we had for each data point in our nature network. I'll then get into a little bit of our current work, so the kind of final step in our ENN creation, which is the monitoring and evaluation framework. And I'll go over a bit of the models and frameworks that we're using during that process. And finally, I'll just give a bit of a brief summary on what resources we have available for our stakeholders and partners. So for the Edinburgh Nature Network, the original plans were based off of the Ecological Coherence Protocol and using the Inner Forest Habitat Network as a bit of a sort of baseline study. They had slightly different goals, but it was similar in that they were looking to prioritize actions in the area. And for us, what that looks like is attempting to use nature-based solutions to improve our city for nature and people. So if we're thinking about what would be a successful nature network, we're looking for something that in the long term is improving the habitat quality, quantity, and connectivity for flora and fauna in our landscape. We're also looking for the well-being for our city dwellers to be improved over time. This could be through education, outreach, job provisioning, and also access to green spaces. And finally, we really want to support partnership working during the process. Now with NPF4 coming out, we really want to make sure that we're sharing best practice during our fairly exhaustive process of developing the nature network to make sure that other authorities are able to do the same. So in terms of developing the nature network, we have a sort of 8-step process that we've sort of consolidated it down into. So our first step was really to identify the relevant stakeholders in our city. So the great part about being in the capital city is that we have a lot of different charities and public and private organizations that are operating out of here. So that was maybe a relatively easy thing being based in Edinburgh, but it was still a great process to get to know who was active in our city. Next, we were mapping habitat layers and then designated sites. So this is SSSIs as well as local nature reserves and biodiversity sites. Next, we were modeling ecosystem services. So this is how we were attempting to identify benefits for people in our city, opportunities for benefits for people. And then we were mapping opportunity areas. So understanding the landowners or land managers that are operating in specific areas so that we can make the best recommendations. We also held consultation workshops in 2021. This was also with my predecessor, Danya Davidson. So this was gathering qualitative information to sort of complement all of that quantitative GIS mapping and information. And then next we were consolidating all of that down into what would become our nature network. And finally, the work that I'm continuing on, which is the monitoring and evaluation plan. So I'll get into all of these in a bit more detail in the next few slides, but I did just want to highlight that a huge portion of this process is GIS mapping. So 4 out of our 8 are GIS mapping. So the first thing we did for the ENN development was to identify these relevant stakeholders. And as I said, we have a huge range of stakeholders and organizations that are operating in the city. The main partners in the project were Scottish Wildlife Trust, City of Edinburgh Council, and the University of Edinburgh. But we had a highly participative process, and we were able to get a huge range of stakeholders who were concerned with social aspects as well as nature and conservation, as you can see from the huge number of logos on the screen. But in terms of the GIS work, for those tasks 2 through 5 that I highlighted, we did have ecological and GIS experts that worked across Scottish Wildlife Trust, University of Edinburgh, and Thriving Green Spaces at City of Edinburgh Council. So just a quick reminder, those are the 4 we're talking about. We're talking about habitat layers, designated sites, ecosystem services, and then finally the opportunity areas. So what we got out of this process was we got 7 habitat networks, 7 ecosystem services maps, and 1 opportunity area to show those stakeholders and land managers in the city. And from this, there was a lot of data that went into our kind of first iteration of the nature network. So as you can see, if we look at all of those points, that shows sort of, rather than individual actions, maybe priority areas in the city. So areas that would require some input to improve either for nature or people. This was heavily influenced by the supply and demand of ecosystem services in our area. But we really wanted to make sure that we had something that provided maybe not quite a wish list, but a more practical guide to nature-based solutions. So we went into our consultation workshops with our stakeholders, and what we were trying to understand was where the actions, where we'd like the actions to be taking place in the city. So we digitized those comments and condensed them and consolidated them into what is now our nature network. So this is a bit of a screen grab from our story map. So this is what our stakeholders and partners can see when they go onto our website to look through the nature network actions. And each of these pinpoints on the map represents an action that can be completed in the city. And the colors are coordinated to our sort of 5 sets of interventions. So our first type of intervention is connect. So this is an intervention type that would be connecting 2 or more areas of existing habitat. And we would provide an example of how someone might do that. This might include planting trees or increasing stepping stone habitats between our parks. We also have create actions. So these are creating a new habitat in the city where there is none. So this could be through suds gardens or replacing non-bioactive surfaces, such as tarmac roads, or increasing the number of green roofs across the city in development areas. Our next type of intervention is enhance. So the final 3 actions in the 5 types of actions that we have are mostly focused on sort of improving existing habitats that we have in the city. So for enhancing, we have enhancing habitat to make it better for people or wildlife. So this could be improving on poor amenity grassland or improving access for people to a specific area. We also have to protect. So for existing habitat in the area, that's really important for people or nature. We're trying to make sure that we're taking actions to protect those areas where they're not already protected or ensure their long-term protection. And then finally, within habitat that's already existing, we're looking at restoring the quality of that habitat, or within an existing area, a habitat that used to exist or has become degraded to the point that we might not consider it fulfilling the role of that habitat anymore. This would be the case. We have actions relating to this tend to relate to wetlands or small burns, things like this, things that might have previously existed but have been dammed or removed. So in terms of on that map and from each of those interventions, what information our stakeholders can access through the story map when they select one of these icons. Each of the icons include an action and an action code. So for the create actions, they begin with CR and then they have a number designated to them. This is held in a repository by us and is also listed on our story map so that people can see exactly what they're getting into when they select one of these actions. For the connect actions, we have if they're connecting 2 parts of the city, we want to make sure that people understand where that connection is taking place and the distance between it. So for example, for connect actions, that's CO, and then list the kind of number identifier in our repository, so CO004. This is connecting these links to Pilrig Park through green corridors. As you can see on the map, those are pretty far apart. So it's just useful to, even though they're technically operating in different parts of the city, we want to make sure that they're connected so stakeholders understand where things are occurring in the city. So for our final step of our of the development of the Edinburgh Nature Network, right now we're working on a monitoring and evaluation plan. So as you saw, now we have a sort of wish list of sorts listed on our story map, which is available to all of our stakeholders. And now what we're trying to look through is to see how is the completion of the Edinburgh Nature Network happening, and how well is it being fulfilled, and are we seeing the improvements that we would hope to see? So during that process of drafting the monitoring and evaluation plan, we've really looked at a lot of guidance and resources. We've considered guidance from the IUCN. We've looked at the other wildlife trusts that have developed nature networks. to see what their best practice has been for monitoring and evaluation. We've also considered the Singapore City Plan, Singapore indexes for biodiversity. And we've also looked at a few case studies. So there's some differences between nature recovery networks and the Edinburgh Nature Network. Obviously in England, nature networks are referred to as nature recovery networks often, and they tend to be much more broad in their description of need across their cities and local authorities. So they might identify an area of the city which needs improvement to nature or well-being, but not necessarily have the descriptive actions that we've included in this. So using these as a sort of jumping off point for us has been very useful. Also nature improvement areas in England, it's something from the mid 2010s that was developed, very similar to nature networks. But again, maybe not quite that level of specificity that we're dealing with. And then finally, just a few other case studies in some other areas. And then, of course, there were many more that we looked through during the process, but too many to list here. So just to give you a kind of very condensed version of what our monitoring and evaluation framework looks like, we're working from this principle of, improving our city's landscape for nature and people, and using those guiding principles of bigger, better, and more connected. We have 3 essential themes, which you noticed in our sort of ENN success figure, and those themes are society, nature, and partnership. So within society and nature, we have landscape scale and site-specific metrics that we're considering. But for society, we're really looking at well-being, access, engagement, and then also ecosystem services. So ecosystem services right now is italicized because that will be housed under a lot of different projects at the council, who will be the main contributors to the monitoring and evaluation framework. But we are working with, again, stakeholders and partners to be sure that we're delivering monitoring projects that are fulfillable over the long term. So considering things like cost and funding. For nature, we're considering 2 aspects, so 2 sort of sub-themes, and this would be habitat and biodiversity. And again, we're looking at landscape scale and site-specific metrics, and with our aim is to be quantifying any changes in the city and also contextualizing these changes. So, really considering things like functional diversity, because we have so much included in our nature network on improving habitats for pollinators. So we really want to be sure that everything that we're identifying can be contextualized in our sort of final evaluation process. And again, we're looking at identifying specifics as well, like the affected species. But this information is included in our action code. So you are able to see species beneficiaries that connect to specific actions, if that's the case, particularly for our create interventions. So our final theme is our partnership. So this is really supporting learning and knowledge sharing across Scotland, really, to be sure that we're providing sort of the best information we can for other people trying to complete nature networks, but also to our stakeholders and partners to be sure that they're having their best experience, and that we understand how much they're really putting into the process. So it's a lot of time and effort has gone into developing the nature network, and we really want to be sure that the efforts of our partners and stakeholders are represented in that. And that means understanding, what they've done in terms of delivering actions and developing the ENN. But we have a few metrics that are required by our funders. So we will go over we will include completion of actions, so just the number of actions that are completed across our nature network, opportunities for long-term funding, and then community outreach and engagement events we're also including in our monitoring and evaluation framework. In terms of the process of doing that, we are developing a logic model. So you might have seen these before. If you're in monitoring and evaluation, this is really getting down to the nitty-gritty of what are your overall impacts you would like to see, what outcomes that might contribute to that impact, and then finally the outputs. So going down and sort of going down and increasing in level of specificity on this particular example, which is from a forestry carbon trust. But we're also developing a data flow map or sort of data route map. And this is really essential to the monitoring and evaluation process for us, is to be sure that we understand exactly which, and again, this is an example from nature improvement areas. This is not ours. We're still in the process of developing this, but what we would like to see is which areas our data is required in, so what reporting we would have to report our data into. This is at Scottish Wildlife Trust as well as at the council. And then how can we collect that data in a reasonable way, and at what points during the year are we asking our stakeholders to feed in, and in what way we're expecting them to do that. So the final thing that I wanted to share today is just what resources we've made available for our stakeholders. So you've seen the kind of, I showed quite a few times, the Edinburgh Nature Network map on the screen. And what we've developed is through the online ArcGIS platform story maps. We've developed a sort of tool for people to find out sort of general backgrounds on the Edinburgh Nature Network, information on the development process, information on how they can get involved, as well as that GIS map. So this is the sort of platform that people are able to engage in. They're able to look at all of the actions in the city, but if they operate within a specific area, they're also able to filter by area as well as action type. And we're trying to develop this further to also allow people to filter by habitat. So this would be, or sort of maybe intervention type. So this would be like wetland actions or marine and aquatic actions or access and well-being actions, so that for charities and stakeholders who are interested in delivering on those particular interventions, they're able to find those easily. We also have our Edinburgh Living Landscapes website, which is a blog, and we're really trying to use it at the moment this year to spotlight projects that are being completed around the city, so that we're showcasing best practice, and we're also maybe inspiring groups who've been involved in the development process to pick up some actions through their next project. We're also providing updates on our monitoring and evaluation, and also updates on our overall vision, which is the Edinburgh Living Landscape. And then also you'll hear from Ali, who's on the Thriving Green Spaces team on the council, but there's also the Thriving Green Spaces website that allows, it's a much more community-facing information that's on there. So it's a lot on the Thriving Green Spaces led projects, as well as community engagement opportunities. They're linking Leaf Parks pilot program, which has some consultations and workshops that are available just now. So that makes it available to the community through there. And then what we're currently developing right now is fact sheets that will be made available quarterly to our stakeholders. So these will be categorizing things by intervention type. As I mentioned, we're trying to do that on our story maps. We also want something that's a sort of something quickly you could pick up and just leaf through if you're interested in, show some species spotlights. And then also on the back side of this sort of fact sheet is those actions and the action codes, as well as involved parties. So this is something that we're really excited about developing, is making sure that our stakeholders understand who's operating around the city and how they might be able to get involved through connecting with some of our involved parties. So that is my presentation. Hopefully I didn't speed through it. There was a lot that I wanted to cover, so hopefully I was able to get through everything. In terms of our key messages, the things that I really wanted people to sort of take home from today was that our main aim in the Edinburgh Nature Network was really delivering that sort of bigger, better, and more connected landscape for nature and people, with a focus on practical nature-based solutions. For the network development process, there was a huge amount of GIS mapping of the local authority required, and also a lot of stakeholder buy-in that was required to be sure that we could complete those actions that we identified. And for the monitoring and evaluation framework, we are also making this a collaborative process. So our stakeholders continue to be involved, but we do want to use best practice like using logic models and data flow plans and frameworks for the long-term security of the monitoring and evaluation plan. And then finally, we have all of those resources available because we have a lot of different stakeholders who have quite a few different needs. And we want to make sure that we're sort of meeting all of those. And just a note, even though this isn't within my current remit, I did want to note that there is a sort of change to resources or potential change to resources that might be available for other local authorities in developing a nature network through the CivTech 8.3 challenge. which is sponsored by Nature Scot and Scottish Wildlife Trust, which has developed a nature network-based software. Now, this isn't something that I'm across, but I thought I would mention it in case you're interested. You would be able to find that through the CIDTech 8.3 challenge. So thank you so much, everyone. And thanks to Denai and Rebecca for a lovely first presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, SK. That was much information, which all fantastic to hear. Finally, we welcome Alexandra Hobley. She is the Ecologist and Green Space Developer Officer of the Edinburgh Council. Alexandra is bringing nature networks to life. So she is currently working on engagement with the communities in Leith, where the Edinburgh Nature Network is developing a pilot project. Please, Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will just bring up my presentation. And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alexandra Hoadley. I am the Green Space Development Officer and Ecologist based within the thriving Green Spaces team in parks at the City of Edinburgh Council. And I am working on the pilot for the Edinburgh Nature Network, which is in the Leith area of Edinburgh. And I'm sort of Sarah Kate's counterpart, as it were, at the council working on the Edinburgh Nature Network. So I'll be looking at how you go of development from a nature network to delivery. So just to start off with, why did we choose the Leith area of Edinburgh for our pilot? So Leith has the highest population density in Edinburgh, and it also has the highest demand for all ecosystem services in the city. So it's an area we can make a really big difference and work with a great number of people. Priority habitats are limited and green spaces are fragmented by the densely built up urban landscape, as you can see on the map on screen. And so what we're looking to do in the area is to improve the habitats that are there, improve the connectivity, and increase those ecosystem service benefits for people and wildlife. As we've heard from the earlier talks today, nature networks really are looking at both people and wildlife and the benefits they can bring to both. So I just thought that I would bring out a few of the example actions that are in the Leith area, as Sarah Kate has been talking us through the different categories these sit within for the whole of the nature network. So I've pulled out a couple of the connect actions and a couple of the enhance actions in the area, and then we'll have a look at a map of the area too for how they pull together. So the first one is connecting Leith Links and Loch End Park. Leith Links is a premier park. It's the biggest park within Leith, and Loch End is one of our larger parks too. So we're looking to connect those up. They're fragmented in that urban landscape, as you saw in the earlier picture. So we're looking to connect them up with green corridors, and ways of doing this are through street greening and enhancing other outdoor spaces in the area. So working with colleagues within the cemeteries team in the council and also with local schools as well. And then you just have the action code after it too. Another connect action is looking at connecting up Leith Links to Meadows Yard Local Nature Reserve. There's brilliant pollinator habitat at Meadows Yard, so we're looking to bring that through, working with local golf courses, another local cemetery as well, and enhancing that habitat within Leith Links. This would improve pollination services, allowing pollinators to move more easily from site to site. But as we've also said, this would also improve the green access for people in the area as well as they moved between the spaces. The first enhancing action we're looking at is to enhance Leith Links itself. It's currently mainly amenity grassland with lines of mature trees. So if we were to put in native hedging with species such as hawthorn and blackthorn around the perimeter, this would provide berries for birds, also improve pollination, of course, but it would also improve and increase sort of noise regulation to buffer the sound of the traffic on nearby roads as well. And there's actually a master plan that my team, Thriving Green Spaces, are working on for Leith Links, which I'll talk about in a later slide. So we're making sure we tie in with all the work in the area as well. And another enhancing action is looking one with a different partner. So this is enhancing green space owned by housing associations in conjunction with the communities that live there, as community engagement is absolutely central to delivering a nature network. And so by working with the housing associations, this will improve the mental and physical health and well-being of residents and also enhance the habitat there for wildlife. And the main housing association is Port of Leith, now known as Harbour Homes in the area. So just to kind of give you a visual of the area that I am talking about for our Leith Nature Network. So we're connecting up the CEC, or City of Edinburgh Council, owned sites within the area, linking up with those owned by other organisations, and also tying in with the brilliant work that the local community is already doing through aspects such as community gardens. So as I said, there are 3 larger parks in the area. So I think you can see my mouse here. So we've got Leith Links right in the centre, our large premier park. We have Pilrig Park and Loch End Park here as 2 larger parks within the area. A couple of smaller parks that I'm drawing out here. There will be talking about a few others with the linking Leith Parks aspect in a later slide. We've got Coley Park and Keddy Gardens sitting here. But of course, we can't forget the brilliant blue site of the Water of Leith running through here. And then we've also got Meadows Yard Local Nature Reserve. So when I spoke about connecting it up, it runs through Craig and Tinney Golf Course here and through up to Leith Links. This is where we're really looking to make those connections and also working with the cemeteries and other spaces within the area as well. And so, as I said, we're very keen to make sure we're tying up with all the brilliant other projects and site management that's happening and already happening within the area. So this is pictured on the right is the draft master plan for Leith Links, which has already been undertaken by the Thriving Green Spaces team, which I sit in, and this was co-designed by the local community. So we're tying in with all the work already done here and also tying in with the community and the workshops that we've already been done and building on that work there as we take forward the master plan in conjunction with the rest of the pilot actions. There's a Coley Park improvement plan, which is sitting right adjacent to the Water of Leith, which we just looked at. And the Water of Leith is doing a lot of brilliant work in that area and within Coley Park. One of the actions they're actually undertaking is they've just put in a biomatrix raft on the Water of Leith, and that actually aligns with one of our actions as well. So that's another great example of partnership work, and they're doing their brilliant work there, which ties in with actions within the Nature Network. Leith Connections is a project led by the transport team at the City of Edinburgh Council, and they're looking at low traffic neighbourhoods and improving cycle networks within the area of Leith. And within their project, they're actually putting in planters throughout Leith. And so what we did there was we tied in with their planting plans and made sure that there were some native species going in there and tying in with the brilliant work they were already doing for pollinator friendly plants in the planters as well. So that means that a transport project is actually helping to enhance our pollinator corridors and increase that urban greening that we're looking to do within the actions as well. As I said, we're working with Harbour Homes and other housing associations within the area. We're working with Craig and Tinney Golf Course, which is owned by Edinburgh Leisure. So I actually had a great site visit there on a golf buggy and was able to go around the site looking at where we could put in trees and wildflower meadows on the site too. And working with them is a great example of partnership working as we think forward to the maintenance of any interventions that we add into these sites. As Craig and Tinney Golf Course have said, if we were to put in a wildflower meadow there, they would then manage that, so do the cut and lifting at the right time of year. So that's another good example of how we think of the forward management in hand with our partners too for anything that we're looking to put in on site. And 1 Million Trees is another great project at the council, which is where we have a project manager looking to increase the number of trees we have within the City of Edinburgh to 1 million by the year 2030. I believe when the project started, we were at about 750,000. And so we're tying in with them on all the great tree planting that we're looking to do within the area. So what are the next steps that we're taking within Leith? So we were recently successful with a grant to Green Space Scotland, which is looking at naturalising park management and increasing access to parks as well. And so we applied for this with our Nature Network hat on. And so we have funding for designs for a neighbourhood of parks from Green Space Scotland. And we've called this aspect of it linking Leith's parks. And so we're looking to improve biodiversity, access and naturalised management of 6 parks within Edinburgh. And 6 parks within Leith in Edinburgh, and we're working with Atkins Landscape Architects on this, and we're co-designing everything we do with the community to bring in that local expertise and what people want to see in their parks. So just here, I've got the spatial plan for what we're looking at within this area, because we will be redesigning these 6 smaller parks highlighted in pink, and also have one spatial plan for the whole of Leith, drawing out those connections and everything we want to do within these spaces to create those connections and pollinator corridors. And so we've got the areas in green here of Leith Links and Coley Park, where there's already new master plans in place, which include nature restoration measures. The ones in orange with Pilrig, Loch End and Meadows Yard already have biodiversity measures in place. There's only minor nature restoration required. But then looking to our sites circled in pink, these have poor quality biodiversity and nature restoration plans required. So these 6 parks here, we're looking to redesign, look at what measures we can put in place. As I said, this is all being co-designed with the local community. So in terms of these next steps and what we're looking at in Leith, the linking Leith Parks aspect of this project, and all these plans need to be completed by July 2023, which is great because it means we'll have some hard designs that we can then show the community that we've worked on in partnership with them every step of the way, and we'll have a nice result there quite quickly that we can then go out and look for that spades in the ground capital funding to see those changes happen. Part of the Green Space Scotland funding was also funding for a quick win, a capital quick win, and you can see what we did with it in the top left hand here. So what we did was create the first wilding wee space in Edinburgh. This is a project which is looking to see every cluster of schools within the city of Edinburgh have an area of public land local to them available where they can come up with nature, ideas for nature, and have nature-based sessions local to them and see everything come to life and continue to be able to work there. So we put in 10 native trees of different story levels and also a wildflower meadow. And now they can continue to use that site for nature-based sessions and ideas going forward as well. And at the bottom here, you can see the first of our workshops where we were getting the feedback from the community and what they wanted to see at those 6 parks. And we're going to continue with those consultations. And just in case anyone on this call is local to Leith or knows anyone who is and thinks they might like to come along, we have our final 2 workshops for this coming up in June. We have one in person on Thursday, the 15th of June at 6 p.m. in Leith, and one online on Tuesday, the 20th at 6 p.m, where people can come along and have their say on the designs and let us know what they would like to see here. And in terms of Leith, we're going to continue stakeholder engagement and scoping, connecting up with everyone in the area, co-design of the pilot actions across the area, and also highlight the actions the community can undertake themselves. And then in terms of citywide, we're going to continue with our communications and raising awareness of the Edinburgh Nature Network so that people are using the tool when they have projects in different parts of the city and want to know what they can do to make it better for people and wildlife. We're also rolling out and mainstreaming the use of the Edinburgh Nature Network across City of Edinburgh Council projects. There's a new working group called the Nature Recovery and Climate Adaptation Group, or NERCA, as you can see the acronym on screen here. This covers the Thriving Green Spaces team, planning, the Green Blue Network team, the 20-minute neighbourhood, 1 million trees, our Natural Heritage Service, our rangers, everyone that really has a hand in the climate adaptation nature side of things. So they were all joining up together for that joined up approach, which strengthens our projects and also strengthens long-term funding bids too. And we're going to continue connecting with partner projects and organisations as we look for where our next areas of rollout will be after Leith for the Edinburgh Nature Network in the city. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ali. Oh, very informative. Fantastic to hear. So now we are moving to the last part of our webinar. I would like to open the discussion on our Q&A. And so thank you very much to the speakers to be able to stay in the call and answer any burning question. So SK, if you can pop up your camera, please. We are going to start to answer what is in the Q&A box. Okay, the first question is related to the slides. Are the slides available? There is something that we didn't discuss before, but probably we can circulate some part or most of them presentation from the webinar. We will be happy to share that. Probably you can email us to inquiries@scottishwildlifetrust.org.uk in case that you are interested to have some copies from that. And the second question is, may I ask you, is from Matt Hopkins and say, may I ask you how are you measuring the biodiversity gain? So probably we can start with Sarah Kate answering this question.
Yeah, so I didn't get into specific metrics for the monitoring and evaluation framework just yet, as we're kind of in a process of consultation workshops just at the moment with stakeholders. So we're considering a lot of options for biodiversity gain. I know we have biodiversity net gain as an option, as well as looking at the kind of functional biodiversity and then some GIS mapping work as well. But sort of purposely didn't share that because we're still in the process of deciding that with stakeholders.
I'm happy to just hop in as well and say, as part of our Linking Leaf Parks project, Atkins, who we're working on, the landscape architects, we're looking at biodiversity net gain and what that would bring if we were to implement the changes to these parks. So we're looking at kind of the before and after, and if we did put everything into the parks that we hope to with the designs, what the biodiversity net gain would be there as well.
Okay, perfect. We have another question. This is for DC Tolik. And say, what is the scale of opportunity for urban spatial planning to contribute to nature/climate recovery? And there is a long example at the Q&A box, but the example is related to the 30 by 30 model in scope, and the area, for example, of Bacon and the relic land in Scotland, there is a 0.005%, so very small, of the 23.370 kilometers that is Scotland, 30%. So obviously the urban NBS is very critical, but for nature recovery, spatial planning in rural Scotland, we determine the success of 99% of nature climate recovery in terms of allocation land to the 30% for nature refuge. Probably we can start with SK on this one about urban spatial planning and opportunities for natural recovery.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I could throw in is obviously that it's the urban environment and the rural environment are obviously working towards very different scales in terms of conservation projects. You know, in some cases on the Nature Network, we're talking about planting 10 trees in some areas is making a huge difference for nature, and well, I guess even in some cases people, but obviously in the rural environment, you know, we're talking more on a hectare scale of conservation projects. So that's the most that I can contribute because I'm based in sort of an urban context. But if there's anything else Denai or Rebecca would like to toss in, please go ahead.
I suppose the question is the example given kind of explains it. It is difficult to get a lot of nature value out of the urban area because that space is so limited, and we expect so much from the space because there's so many of us crammed into such a small space. And perhaps, like you say, you're right about the kind of biodiversity net gain being one of the perhaps less important things that are in the urban environment. I know I sound terrible saying that from the Scottish Wildlife Trust, but what people want from the space is probably the most important thing, but that we really need to demonstrate to the people in this space that nature can provide so much for them and can help them deal with a lot of the problems that they're experiencing. And we really need to maximize that space for that gain. And there will be, the increase in biodiversity will happen, but like the question says, the contribution to 30 by 30 will be quite minimal in the urban environment. But it is very essential to make urban living better, more palatable, and with more of us moving to the urban environment and the increasing population in the urban environment, we really need to maximize that benefit through nature in whatever space we can, really. I'm not sure that answers the question.
No, that's right. Yeah, there are interventions. There are things that it still be possible to do in small scales, and still you can get some benefits from that. So we can continue with Sinclair Link is asking about, are you able to advise if Edinburgh Council had a green space network in their local development plan prior to this? So what do you think, Ali?
So talking in terms of green space networks and strategy, so the team that I sit within, Thriving Green Spaces, we're funded by the Future Parks Accelerator. This is funding from the National Trust and Heritage Lottery Fund. It's looking at long-term strategies for managing our green spaces. And so the team for the last few years have already been looking at long-term strategies for the green spaces within Edinburgh. We have a draft Thriving Green Space strategy on our website. And so this is all evolution and in complement to that. And a big part of the first part of the Thriving Green Spaces work was the development of the Edinburgh Nature Network. So all of this is tying into strategies and plans already within the council and kind of the next evolution of those.
Okay, perfect. There is other question from DC Tulik. What is the role of the developer obligation in securing new habitat of site from development and to add to the LBAP outcomes? So I guess you are asking for the local biodiversity action plan. Well, that identify local priorities for protecting and enhancing ecosystem in each local authority area. We are not addressing that specific question here, but clearly the NPF4 on the policy 3 that is based on biodiversity address this biodiversity enhancement. So it's a requirement for that, and at the moment to demonstrate that. If you want to have a development. There is another question about from Steve Edwards. Have any new practical projects on the ground arisen yet directly as a result of the Edinburgh Nature Network being specified? Well, I guess at the end of the webinar we address this one, but Ali, you or sorry, Kate, if you can answer.
I'm happy to start off and then feel free, SK, to add anything in if there's anything else to be covered. So I think one of the examples in terms of practical projects on the ground would be the first Welding We Space. It was a development idea come up with from our outdoor learning team at the council. So it was great to tie the pilot of that into the pilot of the Leith Nature Network and to be able to see all of that come together in terms of practical projects. We look forward to hopefully getting the funding for the designs for these parks, so kind of the spades in the groundwork as well for the linking Leith Park. So those are a couple of the practical projects as I outlined in my talk there, but we are looking to, many more on the ground actions within Leith and outside of Leith as well as we seek to bring these actions to life.
Perfect.
I'll just throw in one quick thing on that, and then also it sort of, my answer will address a later comment on the Pentland Hills. Also that we're going through a process just now with stakeholders of identifying any actions they may have completed over the last 2 years through the Edinburgh Nature Network that they haven't previously reported. So Ali and I are working on this together. There's quite a few groups who are active at the council. For example, the Natural Heritage team is quite active in the Pentland Hills, and they're fulfilling actions there that relate to the Nature Network. So there are quite a few actions, quite a few projects that have arisen from these actions at CEC as well as through our other stakeholders, and we're just going through a process of compiling those now.
Okay, perfect. So you address also the Pentland Hills question. Is the Edinburgh Nature Network's map of action publicity available? I guess when you show the website, but if you can explicitly to explain that.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly that we can make my slides publicly available, but our story map website, I'll pop in the chat so that people can see it, but they'll also be able to access that through a link in my slides if they're interested, but I'll pop the story map URL in the chat, and then you can look at all of our actions there.
Okay, there is another question from DC Tulik. How much private finance, no charity, no public, is involved in Edinburgh natural-based solutions, I guess. So Rebecca, if you can comment on this one.
Involved in nature-based solutions, it completely depends on the project, I suppose. I'm not sure whether that's come into Edinburgh's Nature Network at all. I don't think you've got any private financing yet. Maybe that's something you look forward to in the future. But there's a lot of conversations around this. I think it's just that they're trying to sort of iron out the kinks, I think, around the kind of CivDec challenges and looking at natural capital and kind of the payments based around that will be important into the future. But yeah, we just want to avoid any missteps that have happened previously around kind of carbon credits as well, and just get it just so. I'm not sure I can really speak much more to that.
Yeah, just as you said, Rebecca, these are aspects that we're looking into as well, as you outlined.
Yeah, another thing that is under development, yeah, I guess, is what Ellie Mills is asking. Hi, I'm interested to know whether new planning applications with Edinburgh will be required to demonstrate how they can contribute to actions identified through the Edinburgh Living Landscape. This could demonstrate the delivery of the NPF4 policies. Well, the NPF4 was just released, and there are things that need to be updated during the year, or is going to be a requirement during the year. So, Ali, if you have any other thoughts on planning application with Edinburgh?
Not anything to add to that one specifically.
Okay. There is one more question about well, the slides of the webinar. Yeah, we agreed that we are going to share some of them. And I'll repeat the email. Yeah, the increase.
Should we pop it in the chat, Denai?
Oh, okay. Yeah, perfect. But Rebecca is going to write it down in the chat. But this is increase at scottishwildlifetrust.org.uk. Robert Andrew is asking, there is a mention of ecological and GIS expert working to map out areas that need work doing for habitat and natural recovery through Edinburgh. So could you name some of these experts at all? Or are these just other partners that you have listed? So probably SK, this is for you.
Yeah, so there were so some of the stakeholders and partners that were on that list would be, I would consider some of the ecological experts, but we also worked with Atkins, which is a sort of consultant that the council often works with to develop GIS maps. So they were some of the GIS consultants, as well as our knowledge and evidence team based in-house at Scottish Wildlife Trust.
The next question is for SM. So have you done any research into how to create spaces for marginalized and vulnerable groups? I know various studies such as Make Space for Girls, for example. I guess you addressed that with the indicators, SK, and probably, and Rebecca mentioned some of that with nature-based solutions.
I would just say this is something we're working on at the council as well. We're looking at different aspects of, such as Make Space for Girls, but also women's safety in parks, and lots of different aspects of it is something that we're continually looking into.
Perfect. So Rory McLeod is asking, once you had completed the opportunity mapping stage of your GIS related steps, how readily did a nature network suggest itself in Edinburgh? Presumable remaining habitat was pretty fragmented. What were the biggest challenge around this?
So I could speak to this a little bit. So I guess the only thing that should be noted is that Ali and I both are coming in on the project as sort of working on new aspects of development for the Nature Network. So I would say that it was during that consultation workshop phase that we could really tease out a little bit more information on what specific actions could be provided. So originally I showed that map that had so many data points on it that were related to the GIS mapping specifically, and those sort of showed overlaps in supply versus demand, as well as habitat type, and there is also information on habitat connectivity included in the Edinburgh Nature Network, as well as sort of GIS mapping exercise. And I will say that the consultation workshops were the way that we sort of teased through that quantitative data and maybe put a bit more of a cohesive story together in the city of what actions would be most relevant and most needed, is what I would say. And there was a lot of challenges around that in terms of it's a lot of information. So I think that the number is close to 3,000 qualitative comments that were given by the sort of experts and stakeholders in the city who were included in those consultation workshops. And as you can see, all of the data points that were already on the map, it is a process of sort of prioritizing to an extent, but really identifying what is practical. I know Rebecca showed examples of nature-based solutions where they're really exciting, they're really cool, but they're not necessarily practical. So, you know, there's lots of other ways to do practical ones. So I think those consultation workshops were a big part of that.
Okay. Jay is asking, as a result of this work, has there been any impact in the planning approach with Edinburgh? Example, influencing where the developments are or are not permitted to take place, or an enhancement commitment to mitigation with developments, for example, green roofs or bad bricks. What do you think, Ali?
I would say we work very closely with our biodiversity officer and our biodiversity team who lead on the EBAP, or the Edinburgh Biodiversity Action Plan. And they've already been doing brilliant work across the city on many different biodiversity enhancements and projects. And we have been able to really work in conjunction with them and focus in terms of what we could do with developments, as you've outlined in the question there. But it's been brilliant to work with them because they've already been doing a lot of great work in planning. And I think the Nature Network just helps to join all of that together. And as I said, with the new group at the council, the Nature Recovery and Climate Adaptation Group, it enables us to kind of come together as a team where we're able to kind of lend a lot of our time to the Edinburgh Nature Network. And my time is mainly focused on this and really amplify and work with a lot of the great work the biodiversity team were already doing, looking at planning across the city and different developments.
Okay, there is one more question about biodiversity enhancement. PNG from develop with the city to always be delivered into the council area, or would be there the scope to contribute to the larger scale projects elsewhere? I guess about biodiversity enhancement, we already talked, we addressed that, but for larger scale projects, I'm not sure if there is in the folder any other larger scale projects. Ali?
I think I'd just say, so with the Nature Network, obviously that is a regional project within Edinburgh, and by 2026, NPF4 discusses how it will be a requirement for every council area within Scotland to have their own Nature Network, which is obviously what we're all here looking at today. So obviously for this specific project, it has to be that boundary of Edinburgh, but we're always tying in and discussing other projects where we can obviously go across those boundaries where that benefits larger scale projects as well.
Yeah. And probably this one is also for you. Ellie Mills is asking where there are any projects linking lead walk, working with trams to New Haven.
Yes, so we have been looking at Leith Walk and the tram project, and where we can look at different greening aspects along with the tram project as it develops from Leith Walk, and as it says, to the New Haven area as well. We are working with the team there and all the different departments at the council that are doing any projects in that area. So, for instance, we've been looking at different planting projects as well that can complement different aspects of the project.
Okay, perfect. There is one question from Nora, say, so first, how can we assess the potential of green infrastructure to address the sustainability challenge, such as carbon sequestration and urban cooling? And second is how to develop a framework for optimizing implementation of AI in the built environment. Probably, Rebecca, if you want to address.
I'll try.
From natural-based solutions perspective.
Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting dissertation topic, Nora. But so on the potential of green infrastructure for sustainability challenges, I think a lot of the time it's more kind of, there are studies that have looked at how much, say, green roof reduces the temperature, just very practically assessing that on site sort of thing. And it's quite hard, I think, to assess that sort of thing based on a specific example because everywhere is different. So I think using examples which already exist, and there is quite a lot of scientific research out there to see how much temperature decreases or increases depending on the green infrastructure in the area, and the carbon sequestration there. That has been something that's been covered quite a lot in different scenarios, but a lot of the time I think it is just based on that kind of figuring out what the community wants, and then that would be almost an extra benefit when it comes to carbon sequestration. I think within the urban environment, it's quite hard to sequester a great deal of carbon because there's usually such small spaces, but the urban cooling is definitely something that we need to focus on a bit more. I think we're only going to get warmer and warmer in the city. Urban heat island effect is only going to get worse, and we noticed it a lot last year during the heat wave that we experienced. And I think a lot of the time we're maybe a little bit hung up on the amount of evidence that we have for these sort of things. I think when it comes to greening the urban environment, as long as it's done well with the community involvement, we shouldn't get too hung up on the data availability. And then for the second, how to develop a framework for optimizing implementation. I think this has been covered. This has been something that's been done. So looking at the kind of wider mapping of an area, you can kind of see what habitats are already available. It's something that was covered in the Edinburgh's Nature Network. I think really focusing on the opportunity mapping is the first way forward, and then gathering that community involvement as well. I think, yeah, I think using examples like Edinburgh's Nature Network is a good way forward. I don't think there's a specific framework at the moment, unless Ali or SK, you've come across anything like that when trying to implement the Nature Network, but there probably are. That is something that a lot of organizations, a lot of companies are trying to look into a bit more as we go forward, and that building kind of developments are being pushed into using green infrastructure a lot more. So I imagine there are some organizations, some companies that have come up with their own framework, but I'm afraid I don't know of anything specific. Maybe someone in the participants might have something to add to the chat. I'm sorry, I can't come up with anything specific.
That's perfect. And also you cover a little bit what is our final question is related to, is from Robert Andrew, and say, what are the biggest conflicts that you have with other sectors of businesses to implement these solutions? How do you find compromises? So from the perspective now that, for example, Ali, you are running the pilots, how do you see this?
In terms of, as you say, sort of conflicts and everything, I think sometimes we're looking at just different ways to manage different habitats. So if you're looking at, putting in longer grass in places, that can be a different type of management regime, and just looking into how we would long-term manage a lot of these different solutions can be one way of doing that. So again, working with the golf course was a great solution, because if we would be putting in the wildflower meadow, they would then be able to maintain it. So we know that that's something that would be taken care of in the future. And it's also just looking at the type of, nature-based solutions that Rebecca was saying, that and how they can best align with whatever that business would be. So if we're working with housing associations, that might be a slightly different solution, or we'd be looking than what we're looking at with the golf courses. So it is very much a site by site, looking at the long-term management and looking at the best way of ensuring that we get all those user groups as well engaged in what they would like to see. For instance, there's certain things you wouldn't put in on a golf course, and the same goes for housing as well. So I think it is very much a a site by site, business by business, how we go with that, and finding things that would then, again, with housing associations, make it maybe a better place to live, but then also looking at how it would be looked after long term as well, and the engagement sides of it. So I'd say it would be very much a case by case, very much case by case basis.
Okay, perfect. So I guess, brilliant. We are about to leave the webinar. If there is any question that you see or you want to follow up, you can email us to the same email. And we can manage to answer any other question. But we address everything that I have in the Q&A box. So on behalf of our speakers, thank you very much for everyone that joined this webinar today. Please, if you are interested in other webinars, visit Edinburgh at the Scottish Wildlife Trust and have a look. So thank you very much again, and have a good afternoon.